Going on, everybody? We're here, we're live. Hopefully, you can all hear and see me clearly. And if you can hear and see me clearly, please drop a one in the live chat, and then we can get today's stream started. And as usual, as I'm waiting for the ones to come into the live chat, if you haven't already, please make sure you hit the like button. That is the most important thing that you can do for me on this channel. That helps to ensure that those who are subscribed to this channel will indeed get their notifications. And it also helps to ensure that this video permeates throughout the YouTube algorithm, therefore making it available for others to see this video that are interested in this type of content and who need to see this type of information. Also, please make sure you're subscribed if you haven't already. Hit the like button, or I should say hit the bell notification next to the subscribe button so you can be notified whenever I release a new video. And lastly, please make sure you share this video out on your social media platforms as well to let everyone know that I'm currently live, but it also has the same effect by assisting me in the YouTube algorithm. And now that I see the ones are starting to come in, we can get today's show started. Now, the title of today's stream is Brandon Johnson refuses to deport repeat offender criminal migrants, right? I want to get into this, and I wanted to touch on this because I remember, hold on just a moment, folks. My apologies, and hopefully I don't lose track. Shout out to Torian Rain Reloaded. Torian almost had 1,000 people in his live stream today. I was there. I was checking it out. I was watching the numbers go up. And I just wanted to give you a round of applause, brother, for almost hitting that 1,000 live stream viewers. That's a huge milestone. You were almost there, and you're going to get it pretty soon, though, bro. But just shout out to you and round of applause to you for a great stream that you put up this morning as well, and what you got going on your channel. So go ahead and subscribe to Torian Rain Reloaded if you're not subscribed to this channel already. But as I was saying, now hopefully I don't lose track of where I was going with things. So I just wanted to shout out, our good bro, Torian real quick. I wanted to make sure to bring this up and to speak on this topic because I remember and recall back when shelters and so-called migrants were first being housed and placed in Black neighborhoods on the south side of Chicago, as well as on the west side of Chicago, the residents there had legitimate gripes, complaints, and concerns about their safety, their own personal safety, the safety of their neighbors, their children, and so on and so forth. And what placing these so-called migrants in their community would mean for their community and how much and how damaging it could be to their community. Well, as time moved forward, all their concerns and fears that they had came to pass. Originally, the Black residents of the South Side and the West Side were being told that they were being xenophobic and spreading anti-immigrant rhetoric. But once again, as time unfolded, we saw that these shelters placed in Black neighborhoods on the South Side and West Side of Chicago had degenerated, I should say, to becoming that which is similar to a trap house or project housing complexes, where you had all type of drugs going on in those areas. There was all type of drinking, partying all through the night. You had sex trafficking going on. People were selling drugs in the area. Then you started seeing so-called migrants brandishing guns in certain places. And there was even a situation on the South Side where there was a situation where, if I remember correctly, a so-called migrant parked his vehicle in front of the driveway of a South Side resident. The resident asked for the so-called migrant to move his vehicle from in front of the driveway. He didn't want to move the vehicle from in front of the driveway. So now an altercation is beginning to occur between the so-called migrant and the South Side resident because the migrant will not move his vehicle from the resident's driveway. And then what proceeds to happen, if I remember correctly, it was a large number of about, maybe 12 to 15 migrants came running out of the shelter, and they were getting ready to jump the South Side resident. They were going to beat that man to the ground. And what happened from that moment forward is that were those individuals, those 12 to 15 so-called migrants that came rushing out to jump this man for kindly asking the migrant to move his car away from his driveway, did those individuals that rushed out of the shelter to beat this man up, did they get deported? No. They were just simply expelled from the migrant shelter system, but were still free to roam throughout Chicago, right? So we're seeing this pattern develop now. And that's what we're going to get into here as I read this Chicago Sun-Times article, where we're seeing these folks committing crimes and then the charges just being dismissed. And they're allowed to go on with their lives as if nothing happened. So let's dive into this right now. And before we do that, there are 160 of you all in the live stream right now. Please hit the like button if you haven't already. And we're going to get into this article. And this article here is called, "Despite Internal Police Alerts, Scant Evidence of Violent Gang Members Among Venezuelan Migrants in Chicago." So let's jump into this right now. So it reads as such, and this is one of those articles as well. Let me make sure to get a link to this, and I'm going to do you all a favor, and I'm going to drop the link in the live chat right now. So I just dropped the link to this article in the live chat. This is one of those articles that it was just so good and so informative that you just have to read the whole thing. Normally, you break these articles down and you have your highlighter out and you only read certain parts. This article isn't that long, but there's so much information given on here that we're going to just have to go through the whole thing. Okay, so let's jump right into this right now. So it reads as such. The Chicago Police Department is warning officers to be on the lookout for members of a violent Venezuelan prison gang they say might be living among the 20,000 migrants who've come to the city over the past year. But there's little publicity, there's little publicly available evidence that the gang, El Terrain de Arugua, if I'm saying that right, has a presence in Chicago. The gang is known in South America for human trafficking, drug sales, kidnapping, and the violence that comes with it all. A Chicago Sun-Times analysis based on news reports, crime data, and court records identified more than 30 migrants from Venezuela who've been arrested in Chicago and DuPage County since April. More than half of the cases involve theft and shoplifting. 2 involved violent crimes and robbery and a stabbing. Records show that only one of those migrants charged with domestic battery is listed in Chicago police records as being a suspected member of the prison gang. Stores such as Macy's and Nordstrom have been repeat targets of retail theft by Venezuelan migrant suspects in Chicago and Oak Park, according to police. So these are frequent areas and frequent stores that keep getting hit in Chicago and in Oak Brook. One of them was accused of having hit 2 stores in 4 days. So they're getting busy over there. 2 stores in 4 days. On May 4th, the 34-year-old man was arrested and charged with stealing a watch, cologne, and jewelry worth a total of $329 at the Nordstrom at 55th East Grand Avenue. But the case was dismissed. On May 8th, he was arrested under a different name on a charge of stealing $720 of sportswear from Macy's at 111 North State Street. That case is pending. Let's pause for a moment because the next paragraph continues on with the same man, but let's pause for a moment. His first case of theft was dismissed for reasons unknown, right? Because he got caught stealing. They charged him, but then dismissed him. Then he got caught stealing again under a different name. So these are the advantages of these so-called migrants who are coming across the country, many of them illegally. They have the ability that we're seeing here to change their identities on the fly, because he was arrested under one name when he committed one crime. And then after being charged and after committing a crime and being charged, He said, well, hey, since I'm an undocumented bro, as our good brother Rob from Black Light Revelations 2 would say, since I'm an undocumented bro, I'll just change my identity and commit more crimes. Now he got caught and they were able to put two and two together and see that it's the same person. But that is something noteworthy to point out and to hang on to mentally, to keep in the back of your mind, that these individuals are out here shifting identities on us after committing crimes. Just take note of that and keep that in mind. Now let's carry on, because this same individual continues to commit crimes in Chicago, but it keeps getting dismissed. As the article reads, the same man was arrested April 27th after punching another man in the face at a shelter in an argument over his turning on the lights too early in a communal sleeping area. According to police, that case got dismissed too. So everything this man does, from punching someone in the face, which is assault, to theft, everything he does gets dismissed. This is a common thing that we're seeing, and a pattern that we're seeing repeated within the city of Chicago. Once again, go back to the last story that I told you about at the beginning of this stream, about the man who was going to get jumped by about 12 to 15 migrants running out of a shelter. None of them were charged with anything. They were just expelled from the shelter system and then told they were free to roam throughout the city of Chicago. Now let's carry on, because the article continues to read, in DuPage County, 2 Venezuelan migrants living in Chicago were arrested on felony shoplifting charges at the Macy's at Oak Brook Center on October 23rd. 2 others were arrested for the same charges a week later at the same store. Of the cases, the Sun-Times reviewed, the most serious involved the Venezuelan migrant, George Goyo, 23, who was charged with stabbing a fellow asylum seeker in August in the bathroom at the Grand Crossing police station where Goyo was living. He's free while awaiting trial for an aggravated battery. If I stabbed you, under normal circumstances, if I stabbed you, wouldn't that be called attempted murder? I would assume if I took a knife and I stabbed you with it, that would be attempted murder, because that could take you out of here, depending on if I hit a vital organ or a vital artery. But instead, let's go back to the article. He was charged with what? Let's see. What was he charged with again? Instead, he was charged with aggravated battery. Another Venezuelan migrant was accused of pulling a knife on a far south side man and demanding his belongings in September outside the Standard Club at 320 South Plymouth Court. The suspect was living at the club, which has been converted into a migrant shelter. The case, surprise, surprise, was dismissed. So what we're seeing here by Brandon Johnson in Chicago and J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, is that there is a very strong and concentrated effort to hold fast on not deporting anyone out of the city. Regardless of the crimes they commit, they are refusing to cooperate with ICE to get these criminals out of here. They're just not doing it. The real question, though, is why. Let's carry on. Let's keep reading. The article continues to read, officials with Chicago, and get this, officials with the Chicago Police Department and DuPage County State's Attorney Office declined to discuss crimes attributed to Venezuelan migrants. Why are they declining to discuss crimes attributed to Venezuelan migrants? Well, I would like to take a stab at answering that for a moment. The reason that they don't want to address crimes specifically attributed to Venezuelan migrants is because if you pay attention, when it comes to this so-called migrant crisis, the media's focus is only on the Venezuelans. And it's focused mainly on the Venezuelans because They are the ones above all who apparently fit the description and the requirements of what it would be to be a legitimate asylum seeker given the current state of that country. But the thing is, the Venezuelans are used as a catalyst to allow all other migrants into the country, because we don't just see Venezuelans coming in. We're seeing Chinese nationals come in. We're seeing a host of other Latin American nationals come in. We're seeing folks from Africa somehow making it over to Latin America and then crossing the border. We're seeing people from the Middle East come over through the southern border. Everybody is coming through the southern border, but the Venezuelans are the ones spearheading the charge, right? And by the Venezuelans spearheading the charge, and the focus being on the Venezuelans, given their circumstances in Venezuela being so dire, what the narrative they're able to spin is they're able to spin a narrative of, we need to have sympathy for these people. We need to feel bad for them. And in having sympathy and feeling bad for them, then comes sweeping immigration reform, right? But this sweeping immigration reform will not just go in place to benefit the Venezuelans. It will go in place to benefit the overwhelming majority of Hispanic migrants that have entered the country behind the Venezuelans. You understand what I'm saying? So by putting out information concerning the number of crimes being committed by Venezuelan migrants, what that does is that it removes the sympathy factor that the mainstream media would like for you to have, because you can't have sympathy for anyone who you've allowed to come into the country on the basis of wanting to give them a helping hand, and then they turn around and start stealing from you, committing crimes, stabbing people, selling drugs, and doing all types of other activity. That kills the sympathy aspect of it. And then when you kill the sympathy aspect of it, you kill all the momentum, or whatever momentum you may have behind wanting to put in place sweeping immigration reform. Because now if you want to move on with that and you're running for president, people are not going to vote for you because they don't want that. What they want is deportation, not sweeping immigration reform. Therefore, it's very necessary to keep the crimes being committed by Venezuelans under wraps. And that's what we're seeing happening here in Chicago. And that's why they don't want to give out any information. They're not giving any because of that reason precisely. Now let's carry on. The article continues to read as such. It states, the sheriff's office is aware of this organization and is working closely with local, state, and federal law enforcement partners to monitor and address any potential threats to public safety and other criminal activity by suspected members of the gang, said Matthew Wahlberg, a spokesperson for Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart. The Chicago police and the sheriff's office have put out internal alerts to officers about the possibility of members of the violent El Terrain de Arugua prison gang living among migrants. Officials wouldn't discuss those alerts. They refuse to give you any information. Now, here's where things get really interesting. In late October, a Venezuelan man arrested on a charge of putting hands on his girlfriend in one of the migrant tents outside of New West Police District Station at 1412 South Blue Island Avenue had tattoos that resembled those worn by the gang, according to a Chicago police alert. The gang's tattoos include a skull with a gas mask and an AK-47 rifle, according to the alert, which said that its members, get this, wear Michael Jordan number 23 jerseys because the gang's anniversary is January 23rd. The reason that is so significant is because what that tells me and what that signals to me is the potential for the city of Chicago to be a magnet for this prison gang. It will be a magnet, despite the fact that everybody loves Michael Jordan, right? Which we all do. Everybody loves Michael Jordan. Most of us grew up wanting to be like Mike. In every major city you go to, you'll find a host of people wearing Michael Jordan jerseys. But where would you just seamlessly blend into of all the cities in the world wearing a Michael Jordan jersey? Chicago. So, given the fact that based off this information that they're putting out, they're telling you that this gang makes it a point to wear the Michael Jordan number 23 jersey on the basis of that January 23rd is their anniversary. So that's their uniform. They will seamlessly blend in with the rest of the Chicago population because everybody's wearing Jordan jerseys in Chicago. If they're not wearing a Michael Jordan jersey, they're wearing a Derrick Rose jersey, either or. You get what I'm saying? But if you're wearing a Jordan jersey in Chicago, it's just standard, standard procedure. So once again, like I stated, that kind of implies to me the potential of the city of Chicago being a magnet for this gang. It's something to take note of. Now, before we carry on, there are 386 of you in the live stream right now. Please hit that like button if you haven't already. And let's get back into this article. A separate Cook County Sheriff's alert said investigations have learned that members of the prison gang a separate Cook County Sheriff's alert said investigators have learned that members of the prison gang are in the Chicago area. Kyle Williamson, former head of the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration office in El Paso, Texas, calls the gang a huge criminal threat. They are coming in across the border, says Williamson, who runs the West Texas Anti-Gang Center. We are seeing them. So this is what this guy is saying. We're seeing them crossing. They are coming. But Williamson says he doesn't know whether the gang has a presence in Chicago. I think we are a while away from seeing their true impact, he says. It takes time to get organized. And I want to stop it there because what he's saying makes all the sense in the world. You see, for those who are quick to tell you and me that what we're engaging in here is xenophobic rhetoric and anti-immigrant rhetoric, despite the fact that when concerns like this were shared earlier in the year, going back to the Black residents of the South and West Side, when these sentiments were expressed earlier in the year of fear concerning what would happen once the migrants were placed in their community, and then those fears came to pass, right? What this man is saying here, that it takes time for these guys to get organized, it makes sense. Because those who are charging us of anti-immigrant and xenophobic rhetoric then, to which we were vindicated, are the same folks that will charge us of anti-immigrant and xenophobic rhetoric now. Because what they're going to tell you is that there's no real significant proof of this gang being in Chicago. But the reality is there isn't any significant proof yet. Because as the man stated, it takes time to get organized. They're just now arriving. They're just now getting there. And it takes a minute. It takes some time to get everything together and to get organized. Mind you, Chicago is really just simply in its first year of this wave of endless so-called migrants entering the city. Clearly, it's going to slow down a bit as the winter is now here, or is fast approaching, I should say, if it's not here already. But as the climate changes and the city warms up again, you can expect bus loads of migrants entering back into the city again. So you may not see its impacts as far as the gang is concerned for the next until maybe another 2 or possibly 3 years. But by that time, it's too late. And now they're running certain sectors of the city, terrorizing communities and pushing folks out. We saw this happen in the city of Los Angeles. The LA Times covered years ago where you had criminal Hispanic gangs here in Los Angeles that were firebombing Black residents out of their apartments. How many of you all remember that? This was a couple of years ago when this was reported on. And the guy who was the for lack of better words head honcho of the gang, he was calling these shots from prison. He was in, I believe, an LA prison here, calling shots to firebomb black residents out of their apartments. Firebomb meaning they were literally throwing Molotov cocktails through the window, burning segments of their apartment complex down or of their unit down to get them to move out of fear. That's a thing that happened here. That happened. Organized Hispanic gang terror against black residents. That happened. And now what you have is a situation here in Chicago where slowly it appears that this Venezuelan prison gang is making its way to the city. Because if you're going to be anywhere, especially given their colors and what they wear, if they want to blend in concerning the Michael Jordan number 23 jersey, you're going to go to Chicago. And you have the police putting out alerts saying, be on the lookout for these people. You also have the police, and I believe it was the sheriff's department, if I'm not mistaken, what I read earlier, they don't even want to put out the information that they do have concerning Venezuelans committing crimes. This is all telling me that those of you who live in a city need to be on high alert because the signs are there. Are you going to ignore the signs and pretend like this stuff isn't happening? Or are you going to take action? That's the question. And you take action by putting Brandon Johnson's feet to the fire, as well as your alderman, to get rid of Chicago's sanctuary city status. That's the first step. And then you move forward from there. Because the thing is that Chicago, the police are not able, they're not legally able to, what's the word that I'm looking for? They're not legally able to assist the federal government in removing and deporting these individuals because of the sanctuary city status. Sanctuary city status, in a nutshell, essentially is a no snitching law. It's no snitching, where local authorities do not cooperate with the federal authorities concerning immigration. You remove sanctuary city status, and at that point, you now have a process in place to remove this criminal element from your city. But as long as the sanctuary city status persists and is there, you can't get rid of them because clearly Brandon Johnson and JB Pritzker aren't doing it. As I've gone through a host of cases and charges and crimes that are occurring in Chicago, just for them all to continuously dismiss again. Now let's carry on. There are 441 of you in the live stream right now. Please hit the like button if you haven't already. That is extremely important and the most important thing that you can do for this channel. So let's carry on and get back into this article. The United States' poor diplomatic relationship with Venezuelan government makes it nearly impossible for U.S. law enforcement officials to get warnings about members of such gangs, Williamson says. He says many young Venezuelan members of El Terrain de, I can never say that part, Agura, lean against getting the gang tattoos because they don't want to be recognized as members. So they're starting to not get the tattoos, is what they're saying, so that they go unrecognized. He also says a crown is not a symbol of the gang, as the Chicago police alert suggested. CNN reported Thursday that the U.S. Border Patrol said it has detained 38 possible members of the Agura terrain thoughts. Oh my God. CNN reported Thursday that the U.S. Border Patrol says it detained 38 possible gang members throughout six sectors between October of 2022 and the same month of 2023. In August, a man wanted in Venezuela on charges of financing terrorism was arrested after agents in the Justice Department's enforcement and removal operations learned he was in what they described as the Chicago area of responsibility. The man remains. Let's stop there. because that went over my head the first time I read it. We need to read that again. In August, a man wanted in Venezuela on charges of financing terrorism was arrested after agents of after agents in the Justice Department's enforcement and removal operations learned he was in what they described as the Chicago area of responsibility. This once again goes back to the necessity and the need to remove the sanctuary city status from Chicago. The Justice Department enforcement and removal operations can't do anything because this criminal is in Chicago. Because he's in Chicago, there's nothing they can do. And there's nothing they can do because Chicago law enforcement will not cooperate with them. So now this criminal is in Chicago's responsibility territory. We can't do anything about it. There's nothing we can do. Our hands are tied because they don't want to work with us. So how are we going to find this guy? Because they won't give us any information. Do you see how dangerous this all is? This sanctuary city status nonsense. It is extremely dangerous because once again, in the city of Chicago now, we're starting to see all these criminals starting to seep into the general population amongst the rest of the migrants. Criminals are blending in with them. And it now goes outside of the scope of what the federal government can do because Chicago is a sanctuary city, and it now relies on Brandon Johnson and J.B. Pritzker, but Brandon Johnson and J.B. Pritzker don't want to do anything about it. They're refusing to do anything about it. This is why the removal of the sanctuary city status in Chicago is so critical, because if not, you cannot remove that criminal element from the city. There's nothing you can do. And once again, we see that the mayor and the governor aren't going to do anything about it as well, but dismiss charges. Let's carry on. The man remains in federal custody pending, the man remains in federal custody pending immigration proceedings, according to spokesperson for the agency, who says she can't provide details because of privacy restrictions. The law enforcement sources say they're concerned that laws designating Chicago, Illinois, let me read this one more time because this is important. Law enforcement sources say they're concerned that laws designating Chicago and Illinois as places that provide sanctuary for migrants prevent them from tracking those who are arrested by their country of origin. They say it would be helpful to know how many people living in shelters and at police stations have been arrested in the Chicago area. But once again, Chicago PD refuses to release that information out to federal law enforcement officers because Chicago is a sanctuary city. Chicago, and this sanctuary city status nonsense, is preventing federal law enforcement from being able to do its job to remove that criminal element out of your city. Experts say most of the Venezuelan migrants who landed in Chicago were fleeing rising crime and the imploding economy in their home country, arriving broke after being bused or flown from Texas. The exodus to Chicago began last year with Texas Governor Abbott, a Republican, saying he was sending asylum seekers to Democratic-run sanctuary cities in the north, including Chicago and New York, so those cities would share the financial pain of dealing with the migrant crisis. Civil rights advocates say there's no evidence the migrants pose a particular threat to the public and safety. There's no evidence, there isn't significant evidence yet as it pertains to that gang. I want you to see how, and it said civil rights advocates too. Derek Johnson, president of the NAACP, as well as the Black pastors. Remember, we covered that last week, how Derek Johnson, president of the NAACP, and Black pastors got together with Brandon Johnson to pacify Black Chicago concerning these issues. These are the same civil rights advocates that are now caping for these folks. saying that, well, there's no evidence that says that this is a detriment to the city. These are the same. They're not fighting on your behalf. Derek Johnson Derek Johnson, the president of the NAACP, and the black pastors that were with Brandon Johnson, they're not fighting on your behalf and on your safety. They're fighting on behalf of the Democratic Party and their agenda moving forward and what they want to do. So despite everything that I've read so far, what they'll sit and tell you is that, well, technically on paper, and based off the little evidence that we do have, which isn't much because Chicago PD isn't releasing any of the data. So therefore, technically on paper, there's no evidence. Despite everything that I just read, and despite the way Chicago being a sanctuary city frustrates federal law officials from being able to do their job to remove that criminal element. This just continues to show how the NAACP and all these other mainstream so-called black leaders are not on the side of black America, like people like Al Sharpton and many others. None of them are on your side. None of them are looking out for your best interests. They're all caping for the Democratic Party and the DNC's agenda. So let's carry on because we're almost done with this article. And then we'll be done with this stream for today. So let's carry on in closing. When you think about the abysmal, this is really important because I want you to see how everything that we've discussed so far is dismissed. And this is how people will dismiss it, right? When you think about the abysmal record of the Chicago Police Department, when you think about the abysmal record that Chicago PD has had with databases and gathering information on people, it's confounding that cops would complain about their ability to collect information on migrants, especially legal asylum seekers, says Ed Yahonka, spokesperson for the American Civil Liberties Union of Illinois. Why I wanted to make it a point to highlight what he just said is that if you take into account everything that I've read so far, if you take into account everything that we've discussed over the year concerning the Biden crisis, but better known as the migrant crisis affecting Chicago, take everything that we have known to happen for fact with the information that we do have that isn't being hidden. Did this individual dismiss our discussions, the news that's out there with actual facts and data that supports his point of view that this is a non-issue? Or did he simply dismiss it with sarcasm? It's the latter. And that's what everyone does. They don't take points of data, actual research, and say, this is why you're wrong. They just simply dismiss you with sarcasm. They simply dismiss you with smart aleck responses. They simply dismiss you with falsely charging you of being xenophobic and spreading hate rhetoric towards immigrants. But what they don't do is actually pull up data that shows that you're incorrect. You're just dismissed and you're placed with a label of hate for simply giving out warnings or sharing legitimate concerns, many of which we've already seen come to pass in the city of Chicago. Came to pass so much so that a multitude of aldermen were putting on emergency meetings in order to deal and confront the degeneracy that was arising out of many of these migrant shelters that were placed in these black neighborhoods on the south and west side. Every time we speak on this stuff, and every time you try to give warnings, every time you try to share the news on this, you're immediately told that somehow you're this evil xenophobic person. But that isn't something that should sway us away from discussing these things, sharing this information, giving out legitimate warnings, and spreading the news, right? Because in not doing that, we're doing ourselves and our people on the south and west side in Chicago a disservice by not giving them this information. Because if we don't give them this information, we for sure know it's not going to come from CNN and MSNBC. It's for sure not going to come from Charlemagne and the Breakfast Club. It for sure isn't going to come from Roland Martin. It's not going to come from any of these people who have pledged their loyalty to the Democratic Party over pledging their loyalty to the people that they claim that they're supposed to be representing. It depends on people like you, me, Rob from Black Light Revelations 2, Torian Rain Reloaded, and many others to keep pushing this out there and to not be discouraged by name calling and being told that we're being full of hate. It is not hateful to tell the news. And that's what we're doing here. It is not hateful to put out fair warnings. And that's what this video here is today. And that's what the stream was, a fair warning to those of our brothers and sisters living in the city of Chicago of the possible, how do I want to say it, of the possible rise of this prison gang in your city, to which you have Brandon Johnson and JB Pritzker doing absolutely nothing about it. And you have the Chicago PD, not really the foot police, right? The everyday foot police, but the higher ups, right, in the Chicago PD, refusing to put out valid information that would show that what we're saying is true. When you're going up against all of this, it's important that folks like me, Torn Rain Reloaded, and Black Light Revelation stay 10 toes down to give you all the information that nobody else will. So with all that being said, that does it for today's stream. I want to thank you all for joining me today. There are 515 of you in the live stream right now. Please hit the like button on your way out if you haven't already, and I will catch you guys on the next video. Have a great morning. If you're on the West Coast, there's only about 15 minutes left of morning technically. And for the rest of you all, have a great afternoon. Peace.